So hello everyone, welcome. Great to have you all with us today. We're going to kick off this Biotech X Climate webinar with a brief introduction to Marble. So if you don't know who we are, if you don't know what we're all about, you can get a sense of that. Also going to share some of the areas of biotech and climate that we're most excited about, just to tee up the conversation today. And then we're going to jump straight into our panel conversation. We've got a great panel lined up for you. We'll do around 30-40 minutes of questions to get the conversation started, and then we'll open the floor for some Q&A. Just a couple of quick admin points. If you have a question, please enter your question in the Q&A box. You'll see down here somewhere there is a box called Q&A. That's the box that we want you guys to hit up. If you have anything to ask, we will get to as many of those questions as we can. This webinar is also being recorded, so please don't say anything you wouldn't want on the front page of the New York Times. And aside from that, we should have a great event for you lined up. And just to kickstart everything, I'm going to take a few minutes to introduce Marble and who we are. So just a quick intro. My name's Johnny. I'm one of the founding partners of Marble. And it's my pleasure to be co-hosting this event with my wonderful colleague, Lipsa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lipsa. I'm the Venture Science Associate at Marble. And it's also my pleasure to be co-hosting with Johnny.
Super cool. So for those of you who don't know, Marble is the climate tech venture studio. We partner with scientists, engineers, and operators to solve hard climate problems by building new next generation climate technology companies from scratch. But what do we mean when we talk about a hard climate problem? Well, for us, that means three things. It means high additionality. So it's a neglected problem, but has a massive positive climate significance. It has outsized impact on the climate crisis. We focus exclusively on deep tech. So we're really focused on new breakthrough pathways where problems are not easily addressed with available or existing technologies. We're really looking for the next generation in the fight against climate change. And we're also looking for uncapped upside. We want to attack massive multi-billion-dollar opportunities, which also goes with the high additionality, right? Because we're going to be solving big and hard problems. So hopefully they're going to be for massive multi-billion-dollar markets. But that's really what we think about as Marble and what we're interested in trying to help people to build. And the way we do that is we have a three-step process. So it's a 9 to 12-month program span over three main phases. The first phase we call Explore. It's a 3-month period of time where we recruit scientists, engineers, and operators who have relevant skills against different opportunity areas that we've researched and are interested in finding new ideas to build for. And we spend that 3 months really just trying to find what is the maximum impact problem that you and your skills could contribute to solving if we were to turn it into a venture. And if we find something interesting, we work with you in Create over the next 6 to 9 months to actually turn that into a new company, complete with co-founders, advisors, a clear pathway for follow-on financing, technical economic analysis, risk roadmap, lab access, and all those other things. And at the end of Create, we have the opportunity to become the first investor in that company. If we do, we invest 250,000 euros for 20% of that new company. And when you've progressed sufficiently to go and raise your seed round, we actually then help you get introductions to the best climate tech investors in the world and make sure that you secure the best financing for your idea going forwards from there. Today's topic is on Biotech X Climate, and there's a huge scope of opportunities we're excited about, which Lipsa, maybe you can walk us through. Thanks,
Johnny. So the way we're thinking about opportunities for biology, Biotech X Climate, they're twofold. The first one is using biology for carbon removal, and those are mostly opportunities in bioengineering. Carbon removal means removing carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gases that are warming the atmosphere from the atmosphere and oceans. One thing we're looking at is enhanced carbon fixation by increasing photosynthetic efficiency. That could be with photosystems, Rubisco, C3 to C4 engineering, or any other bioengineering techniques. Leveraging also superorganisms, so organisms that have evolved and learned to do that over millions of years, like azolas, algae come to mind. And then once the carbon is fixed, the other opportunity is also maybe creating high durability carbon storage using these techniques. So producing recalcitrant organic carbon is something else we're looking at. Typically, that would mean sporopollenin, lignin, and other biomass that doesn't degrade for a long time. And then also inhibiting enzymes that degrade these biopolymers that are recalcitrant organic carbon. One thing we're also particularly interested in is how biology can play a supporting role in carbon removal, typically in helping processes that are traditionally chemical, like biohybrids and bioenhanced direct air capture, as well as biogeochemical approaches for increasing air-sea gas exchange or weathering or other processes. The other bucket of opportunities we're looking at is using biology for decarbonization of hard-to-abate industrial sectors. And these are typically opportunities in bioproduction of chemicals or of materials. And that's twofold. So the first part is really the fundamental aspect of it, which involves partially accelerated biocatalyst discovery using computational techniques like metagenomics and homology screening, as well as discovering what are the model enzymes and microbes that could be used for bioproduction. And then the other part is sort of enhanced production pathways in hosts and enzymes. So introducing these pathways in non-native hosts if needed, as well as engineering for robustness and kinetics. One thing that is a big bottleneck in bioproduction is scale-up performances. And that's something we're pretty mindful of. And that's why we're looking at scalable metabolism in microbes, reducing feedstock reliance and dynamic regulation. So making sure that the microbes are producing what they need to produce and they continue doing that without dying off. And high performance bioreactor processing using predictable fluid dynamics. So we can predict that what you're doing in a 1 liter sample in your lab can scale up perhaps predictably in a 500 liter reactor, as well as scalable pathways for downstream processing.
Thanks so much, Lipsa. So hopefully it gives you a flavor of some of the topics that hopefully we're also going to dive in today now in the webinar. If you'd like to learn more, marble.studio. If you would like to participate, meet other cool people in climate tech, be the first to learn about these events in future, we do have a community. You can go to the bottom of our website to apply for that. And if you would like to build the next generation of climate tech champions, we would also love to hear from you. You can apply on our website. But now, the thing that you've all come to hear about is the wonderful panel that we've put together today. So I'm going to get to that now. Let's kick off with a round of intros so you can meet our panelists that we put together so we can dive into this conversation. And maybe Nadine, you'd be kind enough to lead the intros here.
Thank you so much for having me. So super nice topics and very happy to be part of this discussion. So I'm a synthetic biologist by training, but after my PhD, I got super interested in the cell-based meat space. I was lucky enough to find a very cool team working on the startup Gourmet. At that time, we were very few people. I joined them as senior scientist in molecular biology initially, and I'm currently chief innovation officer at the company, working in a very transversal role on the edge of R&D and non-R&D department. So I'm very happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks so much, Nadine. Mark?
Yeah, I'm Mark van Keitz. I'm with the Grantham Foundation for the Protection of the Environment. We've been in the area of the environment for 25 years. The organization was started by Jeremy and Hannelore Grantham. And for the last 10, 15 years, we really have focused primarily on climate. And even more specifically, over the last 5 years, focused a lot on carbon dioxide removal. And we do that on the one hand through grant giving, where we are supporting the broader ecosystem, but we are particularly interested in cutting edge development of technologies that can help us with the climate challenges. And that is both on the side of academic and research efforts through the form of grants, but we are then also able to shepherd technologies towards scale by following up with investments in pre-seed, seed, and Series A type companies. And we are really very broadly oriented across all the areas, and biology and biotechnology are definitely critical tools here, and I very much look forward to learning more about this. Prior to joining Grantham, I was a program director at RPE, have done a number of biology-related projects there, and pretty much throughout my career have been always looking at the interface between biology and engineering with a particular view to environment and climate.
Thanks so much, Mark. And Paul?
Yeah, I'm Paul Reginato. I'm a founding co-director of Homeworld Collective, which is a new nonprofit devoted to fostering the growth of climate biotech, largely taking a human-centered and community-focused approach, where we're trying to help people have access to the critical ingredients for a successful career in climate biotech, starting with community, people to think with, people to develop ideas with, and learn with, and learn from, and secondly, access to knowledge, helping connect people with problems, particularly for people who are relatively new to the climate biotech space, which is true for most people in the space, and helping people to also generate their own knowledge as a community. And then finally, funding early stage research, particularly people who are looking to pursue high risk ideas that they might not have the opportunity to pursue otherwise, because they might be working in a context where they're not yet positioned to be funded for climate biotech applications, but are looking to jump in. And so we'll be hosting events online and in person, developing knowledge resources, using community crowdsourcing and also funding. So you can visit our website, homeworld.bio, or sign up and stay tuned for all of that. Hopefully we'll be ramping up in Q1 2023. And before that, I was doing a PhD in biological engineering at MIT, which I finished about a year ago. And that was focused on biomedical applications, but along with a couple other folks in my lab, which is Ed Boyden's lab, Dan Goodwin and Sarah Sklarczyk and I really wanted to work on climate, and we started getting into carbon removal. Got this really exciting opportunity to work on a climate tech competition at MIT. It was just $100,000, but crucially, it gave us the opportunity to work in climate biotech, which is where I really started to learn and was able to launch my career. And my work so far has mostly been in CDR. Right now, I'm working on a public-facing report on opportunities for biotech in CDR funded by additional ventures, and as an independent fellow at IGI at UC Berkeley. And that'll come out in the first quarter of 2023. So really that journey for me with Dan and Sarah is what inspired us to make Homeworld, to try to help that experience be easier for everybody who wants to do it.
Wow, that's super cool. And yeah, that's an interesting point on people who are usually working on biotech research. They usually dream of working in healthcare and saving lives potentially. So I'm actually curious to know, Paul, from you, and also Nadine from yourself, because you guys were doing some version of that during your academic sort of career, during your research. What catalyzed your focus on climate?
If I may start, my PhD was initially focused on the discovery of new antibiotics for tuberculosis, finding new ways to accelerate the discovery of such molecules, since we know we have a huge problem of antibiotic resistance. In fact, in 2050, as many as 10 million people may die from bacterial infections, since the current antibiotics may not work effectively anymore. And during my research and understanding better this field, I realized actually that developing a new antibiotic is not that easy, not necessarily due to technical reasons, but more financial reasons. There is really no economical incentive to put a new antibiotic on the market. And then when I got familiar to the problematics in the meat industry, and knowing that antibiotics are used in not the best ways, there's too many of them used in livestock, leading to a lot of antibiotic resistance. I also found it very interesting that working on this, climate problem that the current meat industry generates, at the same time solves a health issue. So for me, the universe aligned, and felt very motivated to work on the specific topic of finding a new way to produce meat more sustainably, while at the same time maybe finding a better solution than what I was working on during my PhD.
Wow, cool. So you're solving climate and health at the same time. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the climate and environmental crisis is the problem of our generation. And there are many reasons to care about it. If your primary concern is human wellness and safety, it's worth working on climate. And if your concern is for life on this planet, it's also worth working on climate. And personal conviction to address this crisis is what led me to make the career transition. And I see a lot of other people feeling this pull. So as you say, the vast majority of biotech funding and education has traditionally gone into medicine and human health, which is a wonderful application of biotech. But we need now to rapidly expand that to include also climate applications, both because of the urgent problems we face and the interest of people looking for next career steps. And we have a lot of emerging problems and problem areas in climate, and we need people to step up to that challenge.
One of our founders described health as a largely solved problem, and said that was one of his motivations to move into climate. Not sure we can go that far, but yeah, I'm interested in the same topic though. How is that transfer of skills, right? So you do your academic training and research, focus on medical applications, human health. How transferable are those skills, and where do you see the gaps when you're crossing into working on this in climate?
I think that there's so many transferable skills within biotech. I mean, protein engineering, cell culture. It's all methodologies that you can apply in a different context. So I don't see any limitation to that. I think maybe the more challenging part, but for me personally, that's the more interesting part, is how do you adapt that methodology to something that works for that particular application, and how do you work creatively with other fields of discipline that may intersect with your own work and field of expertise. There's a lot of co-learning to be done, a lot of communication that you need to align on. You need to create some sort of foundation for understanding, at least at a certain level, the same technical basis of what you're trying to accomplish. But as long as you manage to do that, I think it's very interesting that we have a lot of biotechnology tools these days, and finding the right problem to solve is maybe the best thing that we can focus on. How do we allocate all of these resources to find the things that can bring significant change? And then it's more about collaboration, collaborating efficiently, having the same mindset, and finding the right communication.
Paul, you mentioned briefly about community building as well. So I'm wondering, like, if you identified skills that you learned in your medical biotech research that helped you build a community at Homeworld.
I'm not so sure that community building is the skill that I gained during my PhD, but I think, the process of transitioning from my PhD, which is, focused on a very specific measurement technology, and also within a community, a medical biotech community. And then the experience of transitioning out of that has taught me, I think, about the skills that are transferable and what's needed. And I completely agree with Nadine, which is that a lot of the foundational like platform technologies like DNA sequencing, genome editing, computational genomics, protein engineering, all that is really useful and transferable. I think the closer you get to application, the more difficult it becomes. You might be working in different organisms, then also you're working in different problem spaces. And I think when I was doing my PhD in biological engineering in a medical biotech context, I think I really felt like I was able to plug into the problems really easily. I mean, that whole ecosystem is very well developed. You have you have all these accelerators and VCs and open problems that everyone knows about, that everyone kind of has broken down into like a network of subproblems and knows how they relate to all of the foundational technologies and the different unlocks at different levels, which I found was not as mature when I started looking toward climate applications, particularly toward frontier climate applications like carbon removal. And so I think building up that knowledge community and that network of knowledge, not just what the problems are, but how they break down, how they interrelate, how they relate to different platform technologies, and what sort of bottlenecks are present at different places in the network of problems, I think is really the most difficult thing to get in climate biotech for me right now, and that's what we're hoping to try to support at Homeworld.
Sorry, go on, Nadine.
Yeah, no, I can relate a lot to what Paul is saying, also from a kind of a supply chain point of view, because what we're trying to do here is building a new sector almost, and that requires you to find the right stakeholders to work with, and those might not be familiar with your application. So you really need to build also an ecosystem around your application, and that takes time. It takes a lot of decision making, not only internally but also externally, if they want to contribute to that. So because you can't do everything alone within your own company. So that's another challenge that you need to overcome. That is maybe less of a problem if you work in a more established environment like the pharma industry.
Super clear. I want us to dig into the challenges. We're definitely going to get to those, but I also want to take the opportunity to sort of set the scene, right? So we've said there's lots of smart people who work in biotech, maybe that's even in the medicine field. There's lots of problems to be addressed with biotech, where biotech could be helpful in solving some of these really hard climate problems. And Paul, you alluded to maybe the opacity of figuring out what are those problems. I'd like to give Mark the potentially unenviable task of maybe giving us a sense of where are the big opportunities for biotech to really move the needle when it comes to the climate crisis. What are the big opportunities that get you excited? What's that scene setting? Mark, it's the classic, you're on mute, I'm afraid.
No, sorry about that. First, wanted to really thank Lipsa for actually giving a nice overview of the different fields where biotechnology and biological processes are really intersecting. I think that was already a pretty comprehensive overview. I try to distinguish a little bit between the areas where we have been using biology in one form or another already for a long time, and that's pretty critical. It's basically everything around photosynthesis is definitely something that's really amazing, not just with regard to the ability to pull CO2 out of the air at relatively low concentrations, at least by like chemical engineering processes, low concentrations. And so the other part that I think in that context is always important is just the ability to self-assemble. So it's like, that's, I think, a big distinction factor, that you don't have to put necessarily steel in the ground. You put seeds in the ground, for example, that can, and at the same time, biology has really, it's like, in many ways, you engineer software as much as you engineer hardware. And I think one of the things that we should really see is where we can better leverage the software engineering, because when we purely compete with steel, biology might not always win. But if we can figure out how to take advantage of biology in its entirety, and I incorporate into that the ability to actually assemble your factory on site, I think that's really, really powerful. One of the things that you hadn't listed in your process that I wanted to mention in that context is the focus on again, low concentration. So methane is the other one. So it's like, if you can deal with streams that don't burn, for example, or might even be hard to handle with catalysts in the traditional form, biology has oftentimes the abilities to still convert and oxidize these materials. And so that's, I think, a really important part. I think I stop there and let others chime in. So there's a long list, and I think we will never exhaust it in these 40 minutes that we have.
I mean, I would say that, there are many problems that biology can be relevant to. And there are a few that I think biology is uniquely suited to dealing with, which are, obviously anything to do with food, and then also dealing with ecosystem stabilization and biodiversity. When it comes to food, I mean, producing food in a manner that is robust to climate change, and that doesn't just mean changes in mean temperature. It also means extreme weather, drought and flood and heat waves. And I'm particularly interested. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say I'm sure how it's going to go, but I'm particularly interested in ways of producing food that are much more controlled, like producing food using cultivated microalgae, or producing food using controlled environment agriculture. And I think there's really exciting intersection between biotechnology and industrial process at those interfaces that really has to be addressed by biology. And the other one, ecosystem stabilization and biodiversity. Applications there are still developing, but they need urgent attention because our ecosystems are under stress, both from changes in mean temperature and extreme weather, and also invasive species. And ecosystem collapse is a really scary thing. And we want to help the ecosystems make it through this period during which they'll be stressed, and hopefully later in the century we can get things together and make it easier on the planet and not continue to increase the problem. But in the meantime, we need to protect the ecosystems, and that's intrinsically biological.
Nadine, you wanted to say something? I saw you.
No, yeah, I don't know if there's still time, but I think there's also a lot of things that indirectly will benefit the climate by, in my the way I would like to see the future is where we basically replace every chemical reaction that is synthetic, that produces a lot of toxic byproducts with a biological version of it, right? Using enzymes. So we don't just we don't need to dump a lot of toxic chemicals into the environment, or we limit our greenhouse gas production, or by limiting also the energy it takes to perform those chemical reactions. I mean, nature is beautiful for their ability to perform very well at very low temperatures. If you compare it to some of the industrial processes that we are performing at thousands of degrees of Celsius, it's incredible what nature can do. So I think the more we can tap into that potential, we will automatically also contribute to an improved climate. There are some big topics on your list, Lipsa, but I'm pretty sure that if you include all of these other chemical processes, or all the other industrial processes that might potentially be able to be replaced with biology, the list will become immense. And that's something that excites me, and I hope a lot of people will work on that.
Cool. I actually wanted to double click into that and explore more about engineered versus natural solutions, especially when we're talking about bioproduction, as well as, you know, the points that you mentioned, Paul and Mark, about engineered carbon removal. We're sort of creating a new paradigm, if I can say so humbly, in using these sometimes engineered organisms to fix carbon, remove it from the atmosphere, as well as engineer them to create products that were being produced chemically before. How do you see the role of policy evolving when we're thinking of doing this large scale? Especially, I think, in the context of engineered plants. I think you mentioned this in one of our conversations, Mark. But I'm really curious to know how you see this evolving going forward, especially in the context of biotech and climate.
So let me make sure that I understand. So when you say engineered plants, are you talking about genetically modified plants, or is that?
Yes.
So yeah, I think there's definitely a significant concern in the community, and I think as it intersects more with the environmental and climate community, there will be some hard questions that people have to address on what preferences you want. So I think an important element, when you on the one hand want to fully harness some of the biological opportunities, I think the engineering, be it the more traditional engineering or the more recent CRISPR tools, are going to offer tremendous opportunities. But I think it's always has to be weighed against what are the side effects. And I think it's one of the biggest concerns is that you create a different form of genetic pollution where you are potentially outcompeting natural ecosystems or natural genetic diversity. And I think that's really one of the things that you have to, I think, very much keep in mind in making policy decision on deploying these solutions. The other part, and I think that's where oftentimes people see issues with technologies developed, for example, by Monsanto, that it is that you use biology or biological engineering as a vehicle to still put out a lot of chemical pesticides. So it's really, some people would say it's the worst of both worlds. But I think it's really figuring out how do we fully understand biology and leverage not just a simple chemical, but the whole controlling the process and makes that more efficient and effective. And I think engineering and modifying some of the genetic information may be a critical tool here, but it's going to have to be an open dialogue to understand what can we tolerate and what can't we.
But something that we also need to understand, I think is worth mentioning, that I mean, it's easy to refer to GMO, but you don't always need GMO to reach your goal. There are a lot of non-GMO techniques that are very efficient. One method is, for example, what we call directed evolution. You can also push an organism into a certain direction without making specific modification in the DNA. I mean, in the case you do need a GMO, it's not necessarily only plants. It can be microbes that you put in a controlled environment, so the environmental risks are easier to assess. There are, I always feel that the conversation is easily going to plant GMOs or genetic modification of plants in nature, but there's so much more that is maybe easier to implement.
I'd love to explore this a bit further. So one of the challenges that often comes up with biological solutions is that of scale, right? How do you predictably get it to massive scale from idea all the way to commercial grade deployment? And that issue is multifaceted, right? Both in terms of some of the technical challenges and limitations that are involved in that process, but also in terms of some of the funding, financing, milestones, and gates that are associated with unlocking what you would see as progress in order to get to those next stages. Could any of you give us some clear thoughts on where do you see those big bottlenecks that need to be solved when it comes to getting ideas from lab to industrial scale, be it on the biological process side or be it on the finance, funding, infrastructure, skill set, macro environment type side? Mark, maybe you could lead on the finance piece, and we can bring some other people in.
So let's quickly. So there's the biggest scale that we have right now and biologically is agriculture, or that's so but I assume that that's not really what we're talking about right now. It sounds more that you're looking at confined biological processes, be that microbial processes in a typical chemical engineering context. So I think the important part is that you have to understand that in those cases, biology is just one unit operation in a series of unit ops that you have in the whole process. So you usually have the feedstock supply, feedstock preparation, then you have oftentimes biological conversion, and that is followed by subsequent separation processes and further purification. And then you have the marketing and product market fit. So that's kind of the whole value chain that we always have to see. And oftentimes we tend to focus, what do we need to do to get the biology in the tank scaled? Well, that is still a significant challenge in itself, just getting the capital cost right, and that you need to get the reaction rate fast enough to control the capital cost. I think we really need to always look at the whole value chain when it comes to financing, because there's risks all along the way, and part of the company's efforts needs to be to de-risk all the components, and sometimes the highest risk may not actually be just the biology. And so I think that's what I would, it's a little bit maybe a cop-out, but I think taking that comprehensive view, it's like, what is it that you're really trying to achieve? And in that value chain, biology is one component. It may be the best one to solve this particular problem, but it's also, there may be alternatives for it. So it's like, in that context, really see how can biology de-risk as many of these steps as possible for you.
Paul, maybe you could comment from the community and the work you're doing with Homeworld. What are some of the big areas that you're trying to bring more to bear around in terms of unsticking?
Sorry, is this on the topic of like on the policy and GMO or scaling, or?
I'd love to hear about either, but I was hoping to continue on Mark's points on scaling on scaling challenges. But you can answer the policy questions if you prefer.
I would say policy and scaling are the things that I'm least familiar with as someone who's mostly done academic work. I mean, I think the knowledge I have in this is secondhand. But the impression that I've gotten, that makes the most sense to me, follows largely what Mark said, which is that the challenges may not be the biological ones. They may be the ones that come in process engineering and supply chain and scaling and things like that. I once heard someone say, I think it was Cooper Rinsler, that if you can do something thermochemically, then you should. And biology is useful for the fancier stuff. There are people like Solugen and folks trying to break that model.
Yeah.
Again, this is all just secondhand knowledge for me.
And Nadine, from zero to Series A, what's been the big things?
I can comment on this. So I think one of the big challenges for biotech is to overcome this period in time where you can bring your product on the market, but where this product is probably still quite expensive because you are producing at limited scale. It's unrealistic to think that you can immediately reach a cost efficiency that is sufficient to be profitable very quickly in a few years after you launch your company. So you need to think about that, right? In our case, this is one of the reasons, I wouldn't say the only reason, but one of the reasons why we chose foie gras as a flagship product, because it's a high value meat product, and we are pretty certain that we can reach price parity really fast once we start, even at a production scale that is not our final one, but at least where we can produce commercially. So that's something important to take into consideration. I think if a biotech product becomes an alternative to something existing in the market, it's just really difficult. Those products, especially when it comes to climate related products, maybe some of them are subsidized. How do you compete with that, with a biotech solution that is already expensive? I mean, the competition in the market can be really, really challenging. And then, of course, the regulation can be tough. But in the end, I think the most important challenge to overcome is consumer acceptance. Do we have the social contract that allows us to put our product in the market that people will understand and appreciate? For me, these are very important questions to address.
Thanks so much, Nadine.
Could I add something?
Please.
So I think I'm very concerned in climate tech broadly about a bubble, because I think a lot of people are really interested in there's all these really cool ideas. Let's build them. Let's scale them. They're all really capital intensive, and they're hard tech, which means capital intensive, and they're trying to scale to enormous to world industries. And there's never been an effort like this in history to upend all of our industries and change them all at once. And that, in combination with many of the people working on these problems are working on them for the first time, I think there's a lot of risk of encountering the kinds of problems that Mark was talking about, where it's the downstream problems that are that are not really an intrinsic part of your new innovation, but they have to do with the scaling. And I worry that if things get halfway to global scale before failing, the amount of wasted capital is insane, especially if that's happening broadly across climate tech. And I think one of the ways to avoid that is to really try to build knowledge resources that incorporate this kind of knowledge, which is normally inside companies or inside privileged silos. Try to make as much of that available as possible, so you don't have a whole bunch of people failing at the same thing in parallel. Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be really cool to have a kind of public diligencing, like an open resource for diligencing of hard tech ideas, not just at their foundational level, but at their, the more realistic level of scaling considerations.
But at the same time, Paul, I think it's fantastic that there are so many attempts, because it's like biology. In evolution as well, you try many things, and then I don't know, maybe a few will work out, and maybe that's exactly what the planet needs. But probably it takes many trial and errors for us to have at least a few things successful, and that's kind of the game we're in. It's high risk, and it's definitely a very good thing that we talk about it and exchange know-hows and try to learn from mistakes. But at the same time, I also think that some of the approaches might be so unique as a whole that it's sometimes very difficult to compare, and maybe it's a good thing.
I want to. Speaking of people wanting to get involved and everyone wanting to jump into climate, a whole bunch of the Q&A has been, how do I get involved in Biotech for Climate? Either I'm a student, or I'm studying my PhD, or I'm a mechanical engineer, or I'm a software engineer. So lots of different backgrounds excited in the Q&A about this opportunity. Does anyone have some top tips on where to start, where to go, good communities, good places for them to search for in terms of starting to figure out where to place their skill sets in this particular biotech X climate landscape that we've been discussing?
My first suggestion would be to find other people who have the same interests as you and learn about problems together, and try to come up with a project and work on it, and see if you can get funding for the project if you think it's good enough. But I think the most important thing is to really start doing it and to connect with other people doing it. I mean, that, at least for me, has been what has been most successful. And then, once you do that, you really learn about the problems, you learn about the other problems that are connected to it. You gain experience that you can then say, you've worked on this and thought about this, and that can help you get the next opportunity. I think really just diving in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there are a lot of cool communities out there. One that I helped to develop is called Hello Tomorrow. It's based in Paris as well. A big conference every year. The next one will be in March, where the deep tech community will come together. So lots of cool startups and people to discover there. But also joining meetings like this one organized by Marble. I mean, they're looking for such opportunities, and connecting with the people who you can meet there often lead to successful outcomes, and it's really by talking to others that you discover the opportunities. I would say it's pretty difficult to find them while applying for vacancies. Of course, it's that also work, but mostly talking to people and being part of these communities is probably the easiest.
So if I may just quickly dovetail on what Nadine says, I think an important element is, however, don't just go into an echo chamber. That means really go out to other people that are not just biotech experts. I think it's really talk to people that try to talk to the people that have a problem that needs to be solved. And then think about if your biotech competencies are able to contribute there, and don't see your biotech competencies too narrowly, in a sense that it's really your understanding of biological processes as much as it is maybe the individual ability to analyze some genetics or something like that. And maybe on the flip side, really for people that are not coming out of the biotech arena, but are interested in that bring different skill sets, it's like really try to cross-fertilize. I think that's things where new ideas are being generated.
And if some of you are in the bioprocess engineering space, contact me. We're looking for a lot of people in that with that
There you
experience.
go.
So
Gourmet is
I
hiring.
can
Gourmet is
do a
hiring.
quick commercial break. This would be my my pitch.
Another question from the audience. Maybe Mark, you can start this one, which is, have you got an example of a climate biotech idea you've heard that's almost too crazy to believe it's going to work, but it could actually work? Something that's really out there and on the cusp of believability, but there's a possibility that this could actually work and move the needle.
Well, I think a number of things that a lot of climate solutions are really a big pitch simply because the scale. So that's, I think it's like we might be able, so the transition, can we make something go? So I've spent quite a bit of effort in the macroalgae space, and I don't know that it's all exclusively biotech, it's more the bio broader sense. And when you start telling people that you want to capture a gigaton, which is, it's a lot. And so finding that pathway, and so we still have, it's an effort where at RPE, at Grantham, we have been putting resources towards going to the critical bottlenecks. And so that's definitely an area that it's still extremely ambitious. I'm not quite sure that I have like a whole exhaustive list. There's a lot of other crazy ideas so that we're interested in, but understanding the other area, and it's not a specific project that somebody has come to me with, but that I've proposed is, if you really want to go after a crazy idea, you look at methanotrophs that you can put on the surface of leaves and that are able to use 2 ppm methane and oxidize it. So it's like the leaves give you cheap surface area, the microbes give you the unique catalytic capability. And once again, this is an idea that I haven't seen anybody do it in detail. It's like, it's truly an idea, but getting cheap surface area and good catalysis can help solve a lot of problems at low concentration pollutants.
Okay, great. Paul, Nadine, any crazy ideas you wanted to complement with? If not, I've got some other questions we can try and run through in the last 5 minutes.
I feel like I'm working on a pretty crazy idea at the moment. I'm so focused on that I haven't given it too much thought, but yeah, my contribution is limited for now. Too much headspace with taken by the current problem.
Okay, understood.
I would say using microbes to dissolve minerals is a really exciting possibility. There are all these organic acids that can catalyze the dissolution of minerals. To be clear, that dissolution of minerals for the sake both of mining in a more environmentally friendly way, and also carbon removal by reacting carbon with alkaline minerals, which can be the same thing. So maybe you can mine lithium and pull carbon out of the air at the same time. But there are these organic acids, and there are also these enzymes about which that don't have much study in the literature, that are reportedly able to catalyze the dissolution of minerals, like carbonic anhydrase apparently can catalyze the dissolution of calcite. And there's this silicase enzyme that is whispered to exist, but hasn't really been demonstrated in the literature. Maybe there's some exciting results recently. It's all kind of up in the air, but if that could be real, that would be really, really, really exciting, because that would solve a lot of challenges in carbon storage and sequestration potentially.
Okay, amazing. And just Paul, just really quickly, one question maybe for you that we can cap off in hopefully 60 seconds, because you touched on some of the answers to this, but you talked earlier about the potential concerns you have around a bubble coming. What are some of the other things that we can think about in the community? You mentioned peer kind of reviewing things and so forth, but are there any other tips that you would give people to make sure they're on the right side of that bubble if they're trying to get into this industry and try to contribute in a productive way?
Yeah, I think creativity combined with rigor is what is needed. So we need creative ideas, but we need to be serious and rigorous about how we evaluate them. And I think we also need to be to acknowledge how hard the problem is and work on it together, because it's a problem that we all have. And if we share knowledge as effectively as we can, and we are as rigorous as we can in evaluating ideas and bold and creative, and I think that is the best pathway to success. And if you subtract any one of those, I think you really weaken the effort.
Very cool. Thank you for that. Creativity X rigor. That could maybe be our next webinar
discussion. And knowledge sharing.
And knowledge sharing. We're in the last 2 minutes now, so I don't think we're going to squeeze in any more questions, unfortunately, but I would like to just give every one of you an opportunity to just share and ask, share where people can find you. One of the big comments we've had in a lot of the Q&As actually is you keep saying to find people in the community, but where can I find these people? So if there's areas that you want to promote or communities you want to promote, please feel free. But feel free to give a key takeaway or key ask for us to wrap up the end of this webinar. Maybe Nadine, we can start with you.
Yeah, so I am a product from a synthetic biology competition called iGEM that I participated in more than a decade ago. But this initiative has grown a lot, and it is including at the moment a wider ecosystem of companies and suppliers as well. So I think a lot of cool projects can be found also there. Hello Tomorrow, I already mentioned it. I just posted the website in the chat box. And then I think also LinkedIn is a good source. You know, I actually often get requests from people asking if they can speak with me for a few minutes to understand like how I got into this, or what the role means. Just trying to be proactive, I think, and there are a lot of cool groups out there to especially now COVID has been not as much influencing our life anymore. This is really a nice time to catch up with everyone again, and just going to these events is extremely effective.
Great, thanks so much, Nadine. Paul,
I want to
say pinging me the site.
Check out
the chat. Yeah,
check out homeworld.bio. Homeworld is the very new nonprofit I've started with my dear friend and colleague Dan Goodwin. Our focus is connecting people with problems and knowledge and community around climate biotech. We're still ramping up our stuff, so we don't really have offerings to show right now, but we're very excited to get moving on that, and would love to meet the needs of people who are interested in connecting with climate biotech.
Super cool. I know there's like a number of the Marble team that are part of it, and we can attest great community. So do feel free to jump in. And Mark, from you?
Yeah, I think I really want to actually echo the Homeworld community. I think this is a really, really exciting group of people where people are coming together and exchanging ideas. The real idea of a learning community has been materialized there in a way that I find is very helpful for this community. So if there's any particular ideas, I don't want to open the floodgates because we have very limited bandwidth and resources. But if you have something special, find me on LinkedIn. And other than that, I think some of the other communities, so Ocean Visions, for example, when you're looking at, they have brought out a number of roadmaps that are ocean-focused CDR that intersects quite a bit with biology, be it macroalgae, they just are in the process of assembling one for microalgae. And I think that's definitely a really good area.
Awesome.
Yeah, Frontier also recently released this gap database on CDR, which I helped with, and there are some knowledge or there are some community sessions coming up for that, which I think the dates should be posted. I just shared a link.
I'm going to just add that to the chat as well. Awesome. I'm going to try and multitask here to add that Frontiers link.
I did that.
You did it perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nefsa. Mark, Paul, Nadine, thank you so much for your time on this conversation today. It was super insightful. Really enjoyed spending the last hour with you all. Lipsa, thanks for being an amazing co-host. And of course, if you would like to learn more about Marble, we do have our own community. It's not biotech specialists, but if you're interested in climate tech and you would like to apply, you can do so in the footer of our website, marble.studio. And if you would like to explore whether you can be the creator of a new crazy breakthrough idea in biotech to unlock gigaton scale solutions, then we'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to apply. Thank you all again, Mark, Paul, Nadine, and we look forward to seeing everyone on the next webinar. Thank you so much.
Great. Lipsa and Johnny, thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.